Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Well, this is for anyone who's ever wanted to publish a book. Maybe it's somebody you know. Doesn't matter whether it's fiction, nonfiction. If you're a professional and wanted to share some thoughts and just boost your credibility, another reason for possibly wanting to write a book. We're going to take you through that process. And in doing that, look at some of the titles. And he's got many that he's published and helped authors along the way. Walk that journey with them to get their books published. And we'll go through that whole creative process as well. His company is NFB Publishing. He's Mark Pogodzinski, and he's the man behind it. And he's back with us. Hey, Mark, how are you?
Good. How are you today?
Very well. Very well. First of all, want to tell you, love your website. It really speaks to what we wonder about in terms of everything that's involved in publishing, but certainly from the titles, you've got so many, and they vary from fiction to nonfiction. We also identified in the past how some people have written books to help them heal and also to help others heal from a situation or a trauma. And I've said it, and I'm going to say it again, and I'll say it again after that. Your cover art on your books is amazing. It's just so consistently cool. It catches my attention. And that's just a piece of the full process that you offer. So what do you think? You want to pick some titles and kind of walk us through what happened through that book, the writing process?
Again, it's different for everybody.
Sure.
Your process is different from my process. I write too. And I've learned along the ways that there's no right or wrong way to do it. Whatever works best for that author works best for them. We can help, give advice, steer you in the right direction if you're having issues. But your process is your own, and we grow into it. It modifies as we grow. I used to use yellow legal pads all the time, and I would write on those, and there's Post-it notes everywhere. And I've known people who can actually sit down and write a linear book on a computer, which I can't do. I think I mentioned once before, I like the idea of the sound effects of the pen on paper.
Well, but yeah, I just want to interject there. I find that interesting because research has continually been done, even this age of technology, that the mind to hand connection when it's a pen or pencil to paper is so much more impactful than typing it. So maybe there's something there.
Yeah, and even specific pens, like I have to have a black G2, and it has to have like the little foam around at the end, and it has to be that, or else there's just something off, and it's got to be that pen or some
Hey
very.
man, I got you on that. Like this is an old school flair, and
Oh
it
my
wasn't
God.
easy to find. But when I write with it, whatever it might be, it just I flow. I feel better. Even if I'm just writing a couple of notes or just anything, I feel more accomplished when I'm using this pen as opposed to just a traditional ballpoint pen. And I don't know why, but there's just something, I guess the energy that goes into it. So I know what you're talking about.
It's a weird thing. I always have my G2 with me, and I have like a
Now,
supply.
now let's go there. The G2, is that like a gel pen?
No, I can't. Gel pens I don't like because they smear.
Fair
So
enough. I got
this
you.
one, it's the click when I'm having trouble thinking. So I'll click it and then twirl, and it's just little things like that. I've known authors use pencil, which I can't use a pencil.
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
about it.
It's something smeary about that, and also maintenance. You gotta like, not that it's a big deal, but then the point goes down. And so G2, who makes it? What kind of pen?
Oh my God, it's like an endorsement. So the big G2,
Ah,
and again, the click.
gotcha.
I have
And
the
I use as my secondary a Sharpie, but it's a roller Sharpie and very fine. And you can beat on it. It lasts forever. The problem with the flares, maybe it goes back to my, I don't know, childhood. You leave the cap off, it dries out. You can reactivate it with a little bit of water, but like this Sharpie, no issues with it. But okay, we digress, but and we move on. Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
I tried to get into the high-end pens in my youth, and I'd buy them and you get the extra cartridges, but I just wound up losing them.
Yeah. Same.
Them
Same.
down. So
I know we may skimmed upon this, but I wanted to be a cartoonist, so that's why I have an affinity for pens. Were you into art, graphics, anything like that?
yep. Talk about like comic books. Was a big fan of comic books. Still to this day, still collect. And the with the pens, I think I might have read it somewhere where one of my favorite authors used a Bic or the G2, and I was like,
Okay.
oh, that's for me now. And
Okay.
I think it was Alan Moore only writes in black pen. And like, oh man, I got to be like him. So I can write in black. Can't write in
Sure.
blue. And it's like an affectation that's become habit. So
Yeah, yeah. And on the cartooning side, I would study cartoonists. And if this one is using that type of board, bristle board, this one's using that type of pen, it's like, man, I'm gonna use that. And then and if it works for you, great. But I think we identified something here. If someone has challenges in writing, physically write it. Yes, it takes a little bit longer, but I feel you can form your thoughts and you're more connected. Yes, okay, you can't go back and erase a line and things like that, but there's a lot of benefits there, and it's backed up by research.
yeah. And then like the erasing the line, when I teach new writers, they're like, don't use whiteout. Don't ever erase it. Put
Hmm.
a line through it, but remember that it was there, and that mistake's important because at one point that seemed like a good idea, and you might go back to it. You're like, no, what? That was a good idea. I use parentheses around my mistakes. Like if I'm not going to use it, I throw a parenthesis around it so I know
Sure.
that's right. But I don't like the idea of deleting or erasing. And then again, it's just a weird affectation that's become habit as I've gone along. And I suppose with you with the cartooning and the drawing, the paper's important to you. It's paper stock and
Sure.
it's not going to absorb the ink. It has to maintain the crisp line. So again, little things like that help. Okay, if you're having trouble with writer's block, you go back to your basics. For me, a yellow legal pad and a pen, and whatever it may be, and that might bring you out of whatever issue you're having in
Hmm.
terms of your creativity.
Sure. Sure. So let's look at a title. Let's pick one out there, and what went through it, the author's mind and how it all came about.
Well, one of the ones we published a few years back that's won a couple of awards is a short story collection, which you really don't find uh,
Yeah.
that much anymore. The short story writer used to be a major type of writer in our country and around the world, but that writer, they've kind of lost their ability to write. No one's publishing short story, especially new authors, short story collections. You have your classics, your Hemingway, and whatnot. But I love the short story. I think it's a great idea, and it allows you as the writer not to write a novel. Like I don't want to produce 500 pages on one plot. I
Hmm.
want to write all sorts of different things, and I want to do different styles, and that allows for creativity. So, Brutal Beast was a good collection that we produced. Um, Craig Buchner wrote it. He's won multiple awards for it. And again, his writing process is a younger writer, a little bit more in your face, a little bit more vulgar, but that's his style, and it really resonated with a lot of readers, and so we were very proud of that. The cover turned out very nicely. I thought it was nice. The pink and the yellow had a nice um, sort of in your face visual. So again, he looks around at his life and he writes from that, and he took real world experiences, travels that he did, and he created this really fantastic collection of short stories. So that's one of our success stories of late. Uh,
Hmm.
and then the exact opposite, we published a book. He's a lawyer by trade, and he wrote 100 chapter book about a one plot line, court cases, and originally it was set in the modern era, but back and forth we hit upon the idea of a 1950s setting, and then we were able to do some nice research in 1950s Detroit because that's where he wanted to set it. I saw a lot of similarities with Elmore Leonard, who is from Detroit, and his writing style. And again, it's the first in a series he has in mind. And so his technique was very different. He being a lawyer, he was very regimented in his writing. style and the way he went about it. And so he would produce as I said, 100 chapter book, one plot line, a couple of variations and red herrings, but totally opposite of Buchner's short stories. So those are just two examples of different people doing different things and some success.
Never even thought about short stories. Wow.
No one really does anymore, right?
Right. Yes. Thanks for putting that on our radar. And in this collection, is there a thread that goes through them, or they're just all random topics and stories?
That's a great thing I think about short stories. You read it, you put something into it from your own life. I read it, I put something into it from my own life. We bring our own emotional baggage. So when I read it, I thought it was about self-discovery, self-improvement, and becoming something, becoming human, becoming more human, however you see it. But I saw it as a opportunity for growth for the characters.
Wow.
I see it as just really interesting stories with no thread. So that's the great thing about, and what we're missing, I think, in short stories. And if you look at like TV shows, every episode is a short story with, a connected tissue of characters and sometimes plot. But if you look at it that way, short stories are TV shows and movies are extended short stories, or it could be novels. But I like that idea of the short story. And I think I do my own little part to try to bring it back.
Hmm. Wow. What's the name of that book again? The short stories?
Brutal Beasts. And again, it won a best indie short fiction in
Wow.
2022. And it's won a couple different awards for his writing. And again, it's brutal. I guess it's tough, I like the title, and it's in your face, and it's really interesting, especially in the modern era with everything that's going on with the flux in society. It's got a lot to say, I felt.
Looking at your website, nfbpublishing.com, if anybody wants to follow along, look at some of the titles there. How about
Amelia is the children's book arm. So we publish children's books under a different imprint.
Oh,
Amelia Press, if you see it there. So,
okay, gotcha. All right, interesting. How about we pick another title and walk us through the journey of the start to finish on it?
so if you scroll down, we do like to do nonfiction also. And one of the recent ones that we've done that's gotten some acclaim is We Remain, which is the Indigenous People of America, written by a PhD, Keith Burrich, who teaches locally here at Canisius University. Excuse me, I don't want to offend anybody. It did become a university. And again, it's his point of view of being a teacher, anthropology and history of what he sees. And he is part Indigenous. And so he wrote this book, and he talks about the stereotypes that American Indigenous people have gone through. And it's really hard-hitting, sad in many cases. And he talks about like the prejudice and other things that we forget about that culture. And it's in my neck of the woods in Western New York, we have the Seneca Nation and the Iroquois Confederacy, and you see the flags from time to time of the Seneca Nation and the Iroquois Confederacy, and we forget the history behind that. So again, he took his from a research perspective. What do I want to tell people about this culture? How did it impact me? How does it impact the greater world? And that's how he went about it. And again, being an academic, he was very regimented in his writing style. And I believe the cover image is his uncle or father-in-law. I can't recall off the top of my head, but the gentleman posed for it, and we were able to get a very nice image, which I think is striking, especially for the cover of the book. So
is there an easy way to find that book? I'm looking for it now.
It's on the main page, and if you just scroll down, it goes Tales from the Trenches, Virgin Snow, and then we have We Remain is the third one down. If you take a look at it.
Virgin Snow.
And then underneath it.
I'm right at Virgin Snow, but I don't. There we go.
Scroll down a little bit more.
Wow. Yeah. The stories within that book, Are these all based on history that he researched?
He researched, and then again, being part of that culture, he had firsthand accounts from his family members who talked about what they went through, and that's interwoven within the history of the book. And again, it starts at the 1500s and works all the way up into the modern era. With what they're facing now, especially in our part of the world here in Western New York, there's tension between the indigenous tribes and the local government, who owes taxes, who's paying for what, and he touches upon that, and it's been powerful and speaks to a lot of people, especially because they're part of that culture. So I was proud of that one. If you keep going down, we have Boulder Point, which is a little mystery series from a locally renowned author here, about a podcast host who gets the first book was called A Deeper Dive. They get into the mystery, and the murder mystery will never not be popular. It works on every level: book, story, TV show, true crime. It is a great genre to work in. You are going to find that you copy people without trying to copy them. There are some plot points that are repeated. You can't be not influenced by Agatha Christie and all the other mystery writers. But It's a really good book. It's quick. The characters are interesting, and it's got a very nice ending in terms of the mystery, wrapping everything up. So we're always a big fan of mysteries. I think that might be the most we published is the murder mystery. Other than I think maybe
Interesting. How that stands the test of time.
Yeah, and it always does. And then some local things that we do. Adam's Way is about a young man who had dyslexia and some learning disabilities, who made a fantastic success of his life through the help of his parents and a local school. So that was a memoir written by the gentleman's mother called Adam's Way. And again, a nice local story, which I'm a big fan of. Heartwarming, truthful, talks about the hard times, but again, has a nice, powerful, positive message at the end. And again, those are always fun too, because we can include some images, and it really brings the reader in because they can see the subject matter. And we're very proud of that book. The cover was designed by the man himself, because he became an architect and a graphic designer. So that was a nice way to use his artwork as the cover, which I'm very proud of.
I remember looking into that book when we first met, and it kind of stood out for me. Have you had situations where you've worked with authors? You don't have to give any titles or anything like that here at this point, but where you really had to carefully suggest that we need to go in a different direction on their book, the plot, or the story, anything?
Yes. No book is perfect when we read it, and I think it's most difficult with nonfiction. Somebody, and I use a term a professor used with me, is bleeding on the page, and you're just putting it all out there. And you got to edit. You got to be careful what you want to tell people about a real life experience, especially when it includes people who you may no longer be friends with, who at that time you became antagonistic. And so we've had to have some very hard talks with people, like, it has to be in the book. Well, it really can't be, because we don't have proof of what they did. It's all conjecture. And I know it made a tremendous impact on the life and on the book itself, but we have to be careful what we say in public. I have to edit ourselves so that we can come across as honest, we can come across as truthful without being overly cruel to someone who doesn't deserve it. So again, fiction editing, I feel, is a lot easier. I can do that. That one I can handle. It's trying to help someone edit their nonfiction piece, especially when it's a memoir, especially when it's about something very personal and traumatic. Those conversations are much more difficult.
Yeah, I could imagine. I could imagine. Somebody's story is their story. And if they want to publish a book about it, that's their prerogative. But I guess your job is to help anybody tell the most impactful story. So
Yeah. And then you don't want them to run into problems where they're attacked.
sure.
They're already an open nerve because they're reliving this situation and they're writing this book. And again, in the world we live in, everything's open to interpretation and criticism. And sometimes that criticism is without thought and intentionally brutal. And so we want to make sure we can insulate the author as best we can
Hmm.
and protect them and protect their work. So if we keep going down, Far from the Twisted Reach is a nice, it's not, I wouldn't call it a memoir, but a coming of age of a middle-aged man. So a modern day Thoreau is how we tried to portray it. Reconnecting with his kids, reconnecting with his spouse after COVID. I got to go on a road trip. I got to see what this world is. And it's a really fantastic travel log that you could compare to Thoreau. The
Wow.
idea of finding out who I am after I've been through COVID and reconnect with the people who are most important to me.
Did he, what was the title of that book again?
Far from the Twisted Reach.
Did he travel by himself to just,
No, so we compare it to Thoreau. Thoreau goes to the woods, but he takes his family with him.
okay.
His country in a car to see and to experience these things with his family. And again, coming off of COVID, where we are isolated and unable to move in the bigger world, a lot of people learned a lot about themselves, and sometimes that those things we learned were not the most positive.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so it was a way to him to grow as a human being and connect with those people who are most important to us.
And also getting everybody out of their environment. Now we're in a totally different spot. And it's often, I know this is his family, but it's often been said, you really learn about somebody when you go away with them.
Yeah.
And I could, it's one thing to go with your family on a vacation for 5 days, but when you're on a road trip over an extended period of time and experiencing new things together, gotta be impactful.
My wife, she has 5-hour limit for car rides. That's it. After 5 hours is all over. And to drive across the country 18 hours, 24 hours, seems madness to me.
Right.
I suppose I would learn a lot about myself and how much patience I actually have with the people I love.
Yes. Fascinating. Really cool to dig into the titles and just the different perspectives of all of these books. Mark, how does somebody connect with you if they're thinking about publishing? They need some help, somebody to walk that journey with them. What's the best way to reach you?
So the website's the best way. You can see the books that we have published. You can see if our product is something that you want to join us with. And, any question that anyone has, I'm always available by email. We can work out almost anything, especially if you just have a concept. That's something that we can all begin with. So the website is the place to go.
Well, the book is about communicating your thoughts. It starts with communication of somebody reaching out to you, but surely you're the go-to from the start to the finish. You take right down to the cover art. Again, amazing. You got it all there. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.